Welcome back into the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wenzel, and today we are talking 5 wide receivers you have got to stop drafting in fantasy football this year. If you drafted Deebo Samuel at the wide receiver 6, Mike Evans as the wide receiver 9 last year, yeah, he went that high. You got burned terribly. So we're going to look ahead, see if we can help you avoid some of those wide receiver traps going into 2023 this year. And I actually want to start with the name that I just brought up. Deebo Samuel. Now, some of you are going to say, Lucas, you're a year behind on this. I was fading Deebo last year. Well, I had 0 shares of Deebo last year. I think we're all a little bit enamored with the 2021 season still. But let me throw a proposal out there. Okay, he's going off the board as a wide receiver 16 right now. What if Deebo is just a wide receiver 3 in fantasy football? What if he's just a weekly flex play? What if? Now go with me here, because that might sound disrespectful to Deebo Samuel, but these are his fantasy point per game totals across his entire career. In 2019, 12.5, 11.5, 21.2, which was his 2021 season, and 13.0. One of those things doesn't belong. And it's 21.2 in 2021. I don't understand how Deebo is still being drafted as like almost nearly a high-end wide receiver 2 at the wide receiver 16. He only had 1 weekly finish higher than that last year in his 13 games. That was wide receiver 5. And he only had 3 weekly finishes inside of the top 24 wide receivers last year. Only 3. Like, the fall-off was real. Deebo, he saw 7 less yards per reception. He saw nearly 600 less air yards. He scored 9 less total touchdowns. He ran 1.36 less yards per route. Now, to put that in context, because it doesn't sound like a lot, that was 37th amongst wide receivers last year. Deebo was 4th amongst all wide receivers in yards per route run in his historic 2021 season. Now, I've also heard plenty of excuses for Deebo this offseason. Oh, he didn't come into camp in shape last year. He wasn't entirely focused either. He was dealing with injuries the entire year. I just don't think any of that changes the fact that Mike McDaniel did wonders with Deebo Samuel in 2021. Like, we now have analytical evidence to compare against these two, because Mike McDaniel, now with the Miami Dolphins, you look at some of Jalen Waddle's metrics from last year. 18.1 yards per reception. Oh, that sounds kind of familiar, because that was the same as 2021 Deebo Samuel. Jalen Waddle was 4th in yards per route run last year. Oh, didn't I just say that Deebo was 4th in yards per route run in 2021? And not only has Mike McDaniel changed teams, but Deebo's situation entirely has changed within the last year. Brandon Ayuk, young, talented, emerging wide receiver who's getting better every single year. He's got great upside this year. George Kittle, he always needs his. Oh, and they went out of their way. They didn't have to. They literally did not have to go out and trade for Christian McCaffrey last year, but they did. That's 3, I'll say 2 elite weapons and 1 extremely good weapon in the NFL that Deebo is competing with. This is nothing against Deebo, the offensive talent, the offensive weapon. But this is a game we've all played before, where we hang on to the one shiny, illustrious season, hoping we can squeeze one last bit of juice out of it, but there's just nothing there. We're not going to strike gold here, people. I just cannot understand how we're drafting Deebo Samuel as the wide receiver 16 when he's only finished inside of the top 24 wide receivers in fantasy points per game once in his career. And that was, guess which season? Yeah, 2021. That's a massive reason Deebo's my wide receiver 28 this year. I just think he's a wide receiver 3 and a weekly flex consideration more than he is an actual lock into your lineup wide receiver 2. I think we need to let go of that. All right, next player I want to talk about here, and this is an unfortunate one. I really don't want to have to talk about DeAndre Hopkins, but we just have to. He's going off the board as a wide receiver 20 right now on Sleeper. How I wish DeAndre Hopkins would have signed anywhere else but the Tennessee Titans. I want to like D-Hop this year. I do, but the situation just stinks, okay? There's no other way to put it. The Titans threw the ball at the 3rd lowest rate last year. They threw 26.8 times per game, the 3rd lowest. Now, they could throw the ball more this year because they added DeAndre Hopkins. That's certainly a possibility. So let's say they threw the ball 30 times per game this year, all right? That's how many times the Titans threw the ball when Ryan Tannehill, he was a quarterback 7 in 2020. That's how many times they threw the ball. That still would have been the 7th fewest last year. And I brought up Ryan Tannehill's name a moment ago, but he's not the same dude anymore either, okay? He's not 2020 Ryan Tannehill. And let's just say Ryan Tannehill struggles, theoretically. Do you really trust Malik Willis, who looked really good in his first preseason game this past weekend? Don't get me wrong, but do you really trust Malik Willis or Will Levis to give DeAndre Hopkins top 20 numbers? Because I don't think they will. I also don't want to overhype Treylon Burks and Chikakonkwo, but that's still some decently formidable competition. They're entering their sophomore years. They've been around longer on the Tennessee Titans than DeAndre Hopkins has, which brings me to my next point. Friend Alex Caruso of the show pointed this out. DeAndre Hopkins, 50 days before the regular season starts, and he's trying to learn this entire offense. Now, do some things overlap between systems? Yeah, of course. But this is not the situation for DeAndre Hopkins to fall into to bank on top 20 numbers from him. I love DeAndre Hopkins, a talent. I so wish I didn't have to tell you to not draft him, but I fear we're heading more in a direction of Julio Jones and Randy Moss type of stints with the Titans. Hint, hint, they kind of ended their careers there. Well, not Julio Jones, but you get my point. He really fell off once he got to Tennessee, but I don't think we're going to maintain the greatness of DeAndre Hopkins anymore this year. I'm going to bet DeAndre Hopkins falls off this year more than he maintains his current value. So I don't have him too far past his ADP at the wide receiver 24. He's going off the board as a wide receiver 20, but I'm just not keen on taking him too close to his ceiling, which I think is closer to the wide receiver 20. And I just think there's other guys with more upside going around him that I would rather invest in. Next player, DJ Moore, and I honestly thought I'd be more in on him this year. But when I saw him going as a wide receiver 22 on Sleeper, I went back and I double-checked my current rankings to see where I had DJ Moore. It's unfortunate, but I knew he needed to be on this list because I think DJ Moore could certainly finish as a top 20 wide receiver this year. I don't think that's out of the range of outcomes. But let me give you the case as to why he's all the way down at the wide receiver 31 for me. I want to take us back to last year where the Bears, they threw the ball only 22 times per game. 22 times per game. Now you're like, well, okay, that's a really low number, but I don't think you understand how low that actually is. According to Rotoballer, you'd have to go all the way back to 1990 to find a team that ran the ball less times per game in a season than the 2022 Chicago Bears did. Now, obviously, the Bears are going to throw the ball more in 2023. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to run the ball 22 times per game again or throw the ball 22 times per game again because that's just not feasible, especially when they've gone out and beefed up the offensive line, brought in DJ Moore. They're going to throw the ball more than that. So I went back and I looked over the last 10 years. The fewest amount of pass plays per season the average was right around 27 over the last 10 years. Okay, so let's assume the Bears jump from 22 pass attempts to 27 pass attempts per game this year. DJ Moore would need a 27.8% target share just to hit 128 targets this year. Now, of course, that's not impossible. DJ Moore, crazy target share last year. He hit that. He was darn close to that metric in 2021 as well. But you look at the 7 wide receivers who had at least a 27.8% target share last year. 6 of them drew 145 targets. And 5 of them drew at least 155 targets. The only one that didn't hit either of those numbers was Drake London, who drew a 29% target share on 117 targets. And where did he finish? The wide receiver 38. My projection for DJ Moore this year, I have him seeing that 28% target share, 128 targets, 77 receptions, just over 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's 13.2 yards per reception. And could that go up if his yak improves? Sure, absolutely. But I also don't think this is all that unrealistic of a stat line for him if the Bears maintain a run-centric offense, or if Justin Fields, or Justin Fields, what he'll need to do is take like an astronomical leap in the passing game. Adding DJ Moore is certainly going to help that, but like we're talking 2021 to 2022 Jalen Hurts kind of a leap. I just don't see that in the cards for DJ Moore this year. So as the wide receiver 22 on Sleeper right now, I'll pass on that. I'm not willing to invest in DJ Moore at that price tag right now. Let's move on. I just brought up him a minute ago, but I am OUT on Drake London this year. I could honestly just copy and paste. I could probably replay my DJ Moore argument, like just rerun it back, because it's basically the same case for Drake London, right? Atlanta only threw the ball 24 times per game last year, only 2 more times per game than the Chicago Bears. And all of their offseason moves indicate that probably isn't going to change, which is even worse. If you're going to go and spend the 8th overall pick on a generational running back prospect like Bijan Robinson, I really find it hard to believe that Arthur Smith is going to increase their pass attempts per game this year. And even like you just look at his team pass attempts per game as a coach, 2019, he was 32nd in pass plays per game. He was 30th in 2020, 19th in 2021, but then 31st last year. Only greater than the Chicago Bears, as I mentioned. And I'm going to borrow another metric from our friend Alex Caruso. Only 2 top 12 wide receivers from a team, or came from a team that was bottom 5 in pass attempts the last 10 years. So only 2 top 12 wide receivers came from a team that were bottom 5 in pass attempts the last 10 years. Now, London's going off the board as a wide receiver 24, and I get, nobody's screaming he has top 12 upside. He's also entering his sophomore year, where we typically see sophomore leaps from these wide receivers, but I just don't think London's in the system that's willing to bend, to tailor to the success of him in the passing game. I just don't think that's real, especially when they draft Bijan Robinson. Again, Drake London, the talent. I love Drake London, the talent. But if we're being perfectly honest, wide receiver 24 is probably far closer to London's ceiling. I just can't get myself to draft him at his current ADP on this Atlanta Falcons offense. I didn't even mention Kyle Pitts. He's got Kyle Pitts around again this year. I just don't trust Arthur Smith to bend, to give special treatment to Drake London to see his numbers inflated to the wide receiver 24 this year. Like, I'm not going to be surprised. Like, let's say he shoots right in the middle between his wide receiver 38 finish last year and his wide receiver 24 ADP. That'd put him right around the wide receiver 31. That's probably more realistic for Drake London this year. That's why I have him at my wide receiver 33 going into this year. Last player I want to talk about, I don't think I need to spend too much time explaining this one, honestly. Michael Pittman Jr. I can just boil this down to, if you're skeptical on the arm talent of Anthony Richardson, you should probably be skeptical on all of his weapons too. Again, this has nothing to do with Michael Pittman Jr., the talent, but everything to do with the situation he's in. That's kind of the theme of this video. I love the talent of all these players. I just do not trust their situations at all this year. It also doesn't help that his numbers from last year, Michael Pittman Jr.'s, weren't all that encouraging. His ADOT, 6.9 yards. That was 92nd in the league. ADOT, average depth of target. His yards per target, different metric there, was 6.6 yards, which was 85th in the league. His yards per route run, 1.57 yards. That was 53rd. Those are some disgusting numbers from Michael Pittman. Now, on the bright side, though, he did catch 99 passes on 141 targets last year, which were both top 12 at the position. But I'm just looking at guys going in the same range after him, around him, and after him. Deontay Johnson, Marquise Brown, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson. Like, those are 4 wide receivers I would much rather have than Michael Pittman Jr. this year, mostly because I think Anthony Richardson has a ton of developing to do as a passer in the NFL. I just don't think it's just going to come naturally to Anthony Richardson. I don't think that's going to be the case. So I am, again, wide receiver 32 might not seem like a bad price tag, but I like just looking at those guys afterwards, I think they possess far more upside than Michael Pittman Jr. does this year. I'd rather just draft them, wait to draft them, or just flat out take somebody else in the range of Michael Pittman. That wraps up, look at that, 15 minutes. That wraps up this episode on the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. Hey, if you want our draft guide for 2023 to see where Cameron and Tyler both have these players ranked, I talked about where I have them ranked, but they shouted out these players too. If you want to see where they have them ranked, where all these players fall in our consensus rankings, fellasdraftguide.com. You can head on over there, pay $10 for the draft guide, or if you don't want to pay us, you can use the code Fellas and Underdog Fantasy. Throw your $10 in there, get a chance at $15 million over in their Best Ball Mania 4 contest. You can go use the code Fellas and Underdog Fantasy. We'll send you our draft guide for free. That's all you have to do. It'll come right to your inbox the next day. So fellasdraftguide.com if you want to see that, or code Fellas and Underdog Fantasy. Underdog will double that first deposit to up to $100. You can follow me on Twitter at Lucas Wenzel. We'll be back later this week with another podcast episode. We'll be back on Friday with another YouTube video. Until then, take care, and we will see you all next time. Deuces.